The twin suns were sinking behind the broken skeletons of old ships. Long shadows stretched across the junkyard as Evan walked through the maze of rusted metal and cracked hulls. The place was silent except for the faint creak of metal in the wind. He had been coming here for years, searching for parts to keep his small ship alive. But today something felt different. The air was heavier. The silence was not the peaceful kind. It felt like the world was holding its breath. Evan climbed over a fallen engine wing and stopped. A sound reached him. It was not the screech of loose metal or the groan of the wind. It was soft, weak, a broken whimper. He froze and listened. The sound came again. A faint cry, thin as a thread from deep inside a mound of shattered panels and scorched wiring. He moved slowly, his boots crunching on glass. He pushed aside old wires, shifting panels with care. The crying stopped. Then it returned, sharper now, as if whoever made it had sensed him coming closer. His heart began to race. No one lived here. No one should be here. Still, something was alive. He found a small gap between bent sheets of metal and dropped to his knees. Inside the dark hollow, two pale lights stared back at him. Eyes, wide, frightened, glowing faint blue in the darkness. His breath caught in his throat. It was not a human. The figure curled tighter, hiding her face in her thin arms. She was small like a teenage girl, but her skin shimmered faintly like moonlight. She wore torn fabric that might once have been clothing. Her arms and legs were covered in cuts and soot. She trembled as if even breathing hurt. She made no sound now, only stared at him with those glowing eyes. Evan's first thought was to back away. This was not his fight. But her body was so thin he could see the shape of her bones. She was starving. If he left her here, she would die before the suns rose again. Something inside him tightened. He could not walk away. He raised both hands slowly. His voice was quiet and steady, the same tone he used for frightened animals. "It's okay," he said. "I'm not here to hurt you." She flinched at his words, pressing back against the wall of scrap. He crawled closer, careful not to touch the metal edges that might collapse on her. One of the panels shifted with a screech, and she let out a sharp gasp, curling into a ball. Evan froze until she stilled again. Then he began moving the debris piece by piece. Slow, gentle, whispering to her between movements like she could understand him. After long minutes, he reached her. She did not fight when he slid his arms under her. She was shockingly light, as if she were made of feathers and ash. Her head fell against his chest, and he felt the heat of a rising fever through her skin. He wrapped her in his old jacket and lifted her from the dark hole. The night air touched her face, and her glowing eyes blinked at the fading suns. She made a soft noise, almost a word, but too faint to hear. Evan carried her across the junkyard, his steps fast now. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every sound made him tighten his grip around her. When they reached his ship, he laid her gently on a padded bench near the controls. She did not open her eyes. He searched through his small locker and found a sealed bottle of water. He lifted her head and touched the bottle to her lips. At first she turned away, too weak to fight but still afraid. Then she took a small sip. Water ran down her chin. She swallowed again, slower this time. Her voice cracked as she tried to speak. Only one broken word came out. "Please." Evan's chest tightened. It was not fear in her voice. It was something heavier. Desperation. He nodded to her even though she had already slipped back into silence. "I've got you," he whispered. "You're safe now." He covered her with a blanket and sat beside her, listening to the soft hum of the ship. She curled into the warmth, still trembling. He watched her chest rise and fall. Somewhere beyond the junkyard, stars were waking in the dark sky. He did not know who she was or how she ended up buried under dead ships. He only knew one thing for certain. He could not let her go back to the cold. For the first time in years, the empty cabin did not feel empty. It felt like the beginning of something he did not yet understand. Evan closed the ship's hatch behind him and locked it tight. The metal door sealed with a soft hiss, shutting out the wind and the smell of rust. Inside, only the hum of old power coils filled the air. He stood for a moment, breathing slow, staring at the strange girl curled on his bench. She was barely moving. Her skin was pale like moonlit water, and her thin chest rose with shallow breaths. She seemed so fragile he feared even sound might break her. He knelt beside her and checked the blanket. It had slipped from her shoulders, so he tucked it gently around her again. She did not stir. He moved to the small heater at the wall and turned it higher. Warm air drifted through the cabin and pushed away the chill. Still, she shivered like winter had burrowed inside her bones. Evan went to the galley locker and found a food pack. He poured warm broth into a small metal cup. Steam curled from it as he walked back to her. When he touched her shoulder, she flinched hard and her glowing eyes snapped open. They flashed with panic like trapped stars. She tried to sit up, but her arms gave out. "Easy," he said softly. "It's all right. You're safe here." She froze, watching him as if waiting for pain. He set the cup on the floor and pushed it closer to her with slow hands. She did not move. For a long time they stared at each other, the space between them heavy with fear. Then she reached for the cup with trembling fingers. She lifted it and took one small sip. She swallowed, then another. Her eyes flicked toward him like she still expected a trick. When nothing bad came, her shoulders dropped a little. She kept drinking until the cup was empty. Evan felt a quiet breath leave his chest. It was the first sign of trust, small as it was. He took the cup and set it aside, then brought a soft cloth to clean her face. She turned away but did not fight when he wiped the dirt from her skin. Under the soot, her face was younger than he thought, maybe 16, maybe 17. There was a strange beauty to her, delicate yet unbroken even in her weakness. When she finished the broth, she sank back into the blanket. Her eyes stayed open, glowing faintly in the dim light. Evan sat across from her, arms on his knees, and studied her without speaking. Questions swirled in his mind. Who was she? Where was her family? Why was she left to die among dead ships? But her expression was guarded, as if any wrong word would close her away forever. So he stayed silent and let the hum of the ship fill the air. After a while, her eyelids began to flutter. She fought sleep like she feared what dreams might bring. She tried to lie down on the cold floor near the wall instead of the bench. Evan stopped her with a raised hand. "No," he said gently. "Not there. Take the bunk. It's warm." She froze again, confused by the offer. He stood and pointed to the narrow bed in the back corner. It was the only real place to sleep on the ship. He expected her to refuse. Instead, after a long pause, she moved toward it with tiny steps. She climbed into the bunk like a soldier walking into unknown ground. When she lay down, her small frame disappeared under the old blanket. Only her faint glow showed she was still there. Evan stayed nearby, leaning against the wall to keep watch. He could not shake the image of her buried in the cold scrap. She had not spoken a single word beyond that desperate please. Maybe she had forgotten how to speak. Maybe she feared her voice would betray her. He did not know. He only knew she was safe for now, and that had to be enough. Hours passed. The ship's lights dimmed to night mode. Evan almost dozed off when a sound jolted him. A sharp cry. He was on his feet instantly. The girl was thrashing in the bunk, trapped in some nightmare. Her arms struck at invisible enemies, and she cried out in a language of broken sounds. Her eyes stayed shut as tears ran down her face. Evan rushed to her side and caught her hands gently. "It's all right," he whispered. "You're safe. No one can hurt you here." She fought for a moment longer, then her eyes shot open, glowing bright like twin flames. She gasped and stared at him in terror. He kept his voice low and calm like waves on a quiet shore. "It's just a dream," he said. "You're safe." Her breathing slowed. Her gaze softened just enough to show she understood. She sagged back onto the pillow, clutching the blanket to her chest. He stayed there until her breathing evened out again. When her eyes finally closed in peace, he sat back and let out a long, slow breath. For the rest of the night, he did not sleep. He watched over her in the dim light, wondering what kind of world could throw someone like her into a graveyard of machines. Somewhere beyond the thin walls of his ship, the cold stars turned in silence. Inside, for the first time in years, Evan felt the quiet warmth of another heartbeat. Morning came soft and pale through the ship's worn windows. Evan sat by the console, watching the quiet girl still curled in his bunk. She had not moved much since the nightmare. Her glowing eyes were closed now, faint light hidden under her lashes. Her breathing was steady but shallow, like she feared even sleep could betray her. He wondered how long it had been since anyone had touched her with kindness. Evan stood and stretched the stiffness from his arms. He moved around the small cabin with quiet steps, careful not to wake her. The junkyard outside was silent again, still and cold under the fading twin suns. He needed to know who she was. He needed to understand why someone would abandon her here. He also knew that questions might scare her away, so he decided to find answers without words. He slipped on his jacket and stepped outside. The wind cut across the metal plains, sharp and dry. Towers of broken ship parts rose around him like the bones of fallen giants. He climbed through the maze, boots scraping on rust. He retraced the path where he had found her, searching for anything she might have left behind. Near the hollow where she had been trapped, he found twisted cloth tangled on a sharp edge. It was the same strange fabric she wore. He crouched and searched deeper. Under a sheet of bent alloy, half buried in ash, something small caught the sunlight. He brushed away the dust and lifted it. It was a pendant no bigger than a coin, cracked across the center but still faintly glowing. Strange curved symbols were etched around its edge. The light inside it pulsed softly like a heartbeat. Evan turned it in his fingers, careful not to break it further. It felt alive. He slipped the pendant into his pocket and made his way back to the ship. Inside, the cabin was warm and dim. The girl was sitting up now, knees pulled to her chest, blanket around her shoulders. Her glowing eyes followed him as he entered. She looked stronger than last night, but still wary, like a wild creature unsure if the cage was real. Evan knelt in front of her and opened his hand. The pendant lay in his palm. Her eyes widened. The faint light inside the crystal flared brighter. She let out a sharp breath and snatched it from his hand with trembling fingers. She clutched it to her chest, eyes squeezed shut, shoulders shaking. Evan froze. He had not seen her show any feeling beyond fear until now. Tears ran down her pale cheeks and dropped on the blanket. She made a sound like a whisper wrapped in pain. When she opened her eyes again, they were wet and shining. She looked at him like he had given her back a piece of her soul. She held the pendant for a long moment before speaking. Her voice was soft, rough from disuse, but clear enough to understand. "My name is Lyra." Evan blinked. It was the first real word she had said to him. He nodded slowly, letting the name settle in the air. "Lyra," he repeated, gentle like a promise. Her lips trembled. She touched the broken crack in the pendant. "It belonged to my mother," she said. "They came with fire. They took her. They took all of them." Her words broke into silence. Evan waited, not pushing. She stared at the floor, voice shaking like a thread in the wind. "They hunted us. Sold us, my ship. It burned. I ran. I fell into the metal and the world went black." She stopped again, breathing fast, clutching the pendant as if it could keep her from breaking apart. Evan spoke quietly, steady and sure. "No one will take you now. Not while you are here." Her gaze lifted to him. For the first time, her eyes did not look like frozen stars. They looked alive. Something fragile passed between them, something small but real. She gave a faint nod and pulled the blanket closer around her shoulders. He stood and found a clean cloth to wrap around her arms. She led him, silent but no longer pulling away. Her trust was thin as glass, but it was there. She stayed on the bench while he checked the ship's systems, her eyes following him like she was memorizing every move. When he brought her another cup of warm broth, she accepted it without fear. She drank slowly, eyes soft. When she finished, she surprised him by speaking again, almost a whisper. "Why did you help me?" Evan looked at her for a long moment. "Because no one else did," he said simply. Lyra stared at him, then looked down, hiding a flicker of a smile behind the edge of the blanket. It was small and quick, gone before he could answer it. But it was there, and for Evan that was enough. The junkyard outside stayed silent, but inside the ship the air had changed. It no longer felt like a prison of metal walls. It felt like a place holding its first spark of life. The next morning came sharp and cold. Thin sunlight spilled through the dusty windows of Evan's ship as he tightened the bolts on a cracked engine panel. Lyra sat cross-legged on the bench nearby, watching him work with quiet eyes. She held her pendant like a shield close to her chest. Her glowing gaze followed every move he made, not with fear now, but with careful interest. Evan tried to act like nothing had changed, though everything had. The silence between them was no longer empty. It carried something fragile and new. Still, worry pressed at the back of his mind like an old wound. He knew the junkyard was not safe. If someone had left Lyra here, they might come back for her. He stepped outside to gather more scrap. The air was dry and still. Towers of broken machines stood like watchmen under the pale sky. As he moved between the heaps, a faint hum reached his ears. He froze. It was low and distant but steady, not the sound of wind. It was mechanical. Evan climbed the side of a rusted hull and scanned the horizon. In the far distance, 3 small shapes drifted above the junkyard. They were smooth, black, and moving in slow arcs. Drones, Search drones. Their sleek frames caught the sunlight as they glided through the air. His stomach tightened. He had seen machines like those before. Slaver drones. They swept dead zones looking for escaped captives. He ducked down behind the metal edge and cursed under his breath. If they scanned the area too closely, they would find the heat signature of his ship, and they would know someone was hiding here. He slid down the hull and hurried back. When he stepped inside, Lyra's head snapped up. She sensed his tension instantly. "We need to leave," he said. Her eyes widened. "Who is out there?" "Hunters," he answered. "They are looking for you." Her fingers gripped the edge of the bench. The faint light of her eyes dimmed with fear. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself as if it could hide her from the sky. Her voice trembled. "They came before. They burned everything. I will not let them take you," Evan said firmly. He moved quickly through the cabin, flipping switches and powering up the engines. The ship shuddered as systems came alive. Lyra stayed frozen on the bench, eyes wide as the hum of power filled the air. Evan strapped himself into the pilot seat and motioned for her to do the same. "Seatbelt," he said. "Now!" She obeyed, hands shaking as she clipped the strap across her chest. The ship lifted slowly from the cracked metal ground. Dust and shards swirled below them. Outside, the drones changed direction. Their lenses turned toward the rising shape of Evan's ship. Red lights blinked on their sides. Evan cursed again and slammed the throttle. The ship shot forward, skimming the jagged hills of scrap. "They see us," Lyra whispered. "Hold on," he said through clenched teeth. The scanners on the console flared with red signals. The drones accelerated behind them, sharp and fast like hunting hawks. Evan weaved through the towers of dead ships. Rusted wings and broken hulls flashed past the windows. One of the drones fired a pulse beam. It struck a mound of wreckage beside them, blasting it apart in a burst of light and dust. The shockwave slammed against their hull. Lyra gasped and clutched the seat straps. Evan fought the controls to steady the ship. Metal screamed under the stress. He dived low, skimming so close to the ground that loose panels rattled beneath them. He triggered the afterburners and shot up through a canyon of shattered engines. The sudden burst threw them high into open air. The drones followed, splitting into a hunting formation. Their sleek frames sliced the sky like black knives. Evan's scanner showed their distance closing fast. "They will catch us," Lyra said, voice breaking. "Not if I break their eyes first," Evan replied. He jerked the ship into a sharp roll and dove back toward the junkyard. He aimed for a cluster of huge derelict cruisers lying in a tangled heap. The drones chased close behind. At the last moment, he cut the power to his rear thrusters and slammed the brakes. The ship dropped suddenly. The drones shot past, expecting him to keep climbing. They banked hard to turn. Evan reignited the engines and darted beneath the hulks of the cruisers. He skimmed through narrow gaps where only memory of the junkyard's map guided him. Sparks flew from the hull as they scraped metal edges. The drones fired again, but their beams struck the wrecks instead, blasting showers of debris. Evan twisted through the maze and burst out into open air at the far edge of the yard. The scanner showed the drones spinning to find him. He hit full thrust and roared away, engines screaming, leaving the junkyard shrinking behind them. Lyra stared back through the window, eyes wide and glowing bright with fear. The junkyard faded to a small shadow in the distance. She turned to Evan, voice shaking. "They will come again." "I know," he said. "But they will not find you." She stared at him for a long moment. Slowly her shoulders lowered and some of the fear faded from her eyes. She still trembled, but her gaze held something new. Trust. Evan kept the ship aimed at the stars, hands steady on the controls. The drones vanished from the scanner one by one until only silence filled the cabin. Lyra stayed quiet beside him, clutching her pendant like a piece of her soul. They were safe for now. But safety was fragile and the stars were full of hunters. The stars opened around them like a black ocean lit with cold fire. Evan kept his hands locked on the controls, jaw tight as the engines howled. The junkyard was far behind, only a fading smear of rust in the dark. But the scanner still showed red marks. The slaver drones had not given up. They were faster now, closing from behind like hunting wolves. Lyra sat strapped into the seat beside him, clutching her pendant tight. Her eyes glowed bright against the shadows. She watched the scanner with silent fear as the red marks crept closer. Her breathing was sharp and quick. "They are gaining," she whispered. Evan checked the fuel readout and felt a cold knot in his chest. He could outrun one drone, maybe two. Not 3. Not in this old ship. He needed to fight smart. He needed the kind of tricks only a mechanic could build from scraps. He reached for the power console and rerouted spare energy to the rear shields. The ship shook under the sudden surge. He spoke without looking at her. "I will need your help." Her head snapped toward him. "I do not know how to fight." "You do not need to fight," he said. "You only need to be fast with your hands." Lyra stared at him for a moment, then gave a sharp nod. Her fear was still in her eyes, but something stronger was rising under it. Determination. Evan pointed to the secondary panel at her side. "When I say now, you open the green valves and hold them until I tell you to close. Do you understand?" "Yes," she said quietly. The scanner beeped as the first drone entered firing range. A flash of red light streaked past the window. The blast missed by meters, but the heat rattled the hull. Evan rolled the ship hard left, pressing them both into their seats. Lyra gripped the panel and held on, teeth clenched. Another shot seared across their path. Evan dove the ship through a field of spinning rock. Asteroids tumbled through space like silent giants. He skimmed the ship between them, engines screaming. The drones followed, weaving through the stones like black arrows. "Now," he barked. Lyra opened the green valves. A hiss of compressed gas rushed into the exhaust ports. Evan triggered the rear thrusters and fired a burst. The released gas ignited behind them in a sudden flash of light. Fire bloomed across the asteroid field like a false star. The drones slammed through the flames. One clipped an asteroid and spun out, shattered by the impact. The other two swerved around the wreckage, still chasing but scattered. Lyra stared wide-eyed at the sudden burst of fire. "It worked," she said in shock. Evan's mouth pulled into a quick grin. Once, the remaining drones locked back onto them. Evan threaded through the rocks, twisting sharp between narrow gaps. Metal scraped as they brushed stone. Lyra moved fast at his commands, closing valves, rerouting power, resetting coils. Her hands trembled, but they did not falter. Another beam sliced past, burning the edge of their right wing. Alarm screamed. Evan muted them with one sharp motion and cut power to the wing, making the ship roll in a sudden spin. The drones shot past, overshooting. He flipped the ship and fired the main thrusters, slamming them back into pursuit range. "Open the blue channel," he said. Lyra pulled the lever. Cold plasma bled from the damaged wing, leaving a glowing trail. One drone flew through it and its scanners flickered. It veered off course, spinning out of control. Evan seized the chance and launched a magnetic charge from the belly port. The charge latched onto the drone's hull and detonated. The blast lit the dark like a flare. The drone vanished in a cloud of molten shards. Only one remained. It dived after them, faster and more precise than the others. Evan drove the ship out of the asteroid field into open space. Stars wheeled around them in endless silence. The last drone closed in like a black arrow. "Can we stop it?" Lyra asked. "We can break it," Evan said. He cut the main engines. The sudden stop slammed them forward against their straps. The drone shot past, unable to slow in time. Evan reignited the thrusters and fired every remaining charge from the forward cannon. The blast struck the drone head-on. Light exploded across the black. Pieces spun away, burning as they faded into the void. The scanner went clear. No red marks, no hum of hunters, only the deep quiet of space. Evan leaned back in the seat, breath sharp but steady. His hands were still locked on the controls like they were part of him. Slowly, he turned to Lyra. She was staring at the empty stars, chest rising and falling fast. Her glowing eyes met his. "You fought," he said softly. "I was afraid," she answered. "You fought anyway," he said. Lyra's lips curved into the smallest smile. It was tired, faint, but real. For a moment, the fear melted from her face. She looked not like a lost child, but like someone standing on the edge of a new world. Evan looked back at the stars. The fire from the battle still glimmered behind them like dying embers. The silence after the storm felt strange. Not empty, alive. They had survived together. And for the first time, Evan felt that he was no longer carrying her. They were carrying each other. Days passed in quiet light as the ship drifted far from the hunting zones. Evan charted a path to an abandoned moon he once used as a hiding place. It was small and green, hidden at the edge of an old star route, and no one ever came there anymore. The silence of space wrapped around them while they traveled. Lyra spent most hours near the window watching the endless stars like they were old friends she had lost. The fear in her eyes had softened but had not fully gone. She held her pendant always. rubbing its cracked surface when she thought he was not looking. Evan did not ask questions. He gave her time to breathe without fear. When the moon finally appeared, it rose like a green pearl out of the black. Faint clouds wrapped its hills and silver rivers glimmered under the sun. Evan guided the ship down through the soft atmosphere and landed on a flat field near a shallow lake. The engines hissed as they cooled. The silence that followed felt warm. Lyra stepped out first. The air touched her face like soft rain, and she stood still, eyes closed, breathing deep. The glow in her skin brightened. She walked slowly across the grass, bare feet sinking into the earth as if she had forgotten how it felt. Evan followed behind, watching her touch every flower and stone like each was treasure. They made a small camp beside the lake using scrap from the ship's storage. Evan built a dome shelter from old panels and heat-proof cloth. Lyra helped without being asked. Her hands were steady and fast, fitting joints and tying cords. She worked in silence at first, then began humming a low tune under her breath. It was the first sound from her that was not fear. At night they lit a small fire from dried roots. The flames reflected in her glowing eyes like tiny stars. She sat wrapped in a blanket, knees hugged to her chest, staring into the fire. Evan sat across from her, fixing a broken drone core with careful hands. She watched him work, curiosity softening her face. "What are you making?" she asked quietly. "A helper," he said. "It will guard the camp when we sleep." She nodded slowly. "My people used to build watchers too. They guarded the nursery caves." Her voice was soft, full of old echoes. Evan looked up. "Do you miss them?" he asked. Lyra's eyes dimmed. "Every day," she whispered. "But they are gone." The silence after her words was gentle, not heavy. Evan nodded. "Then we will make something new." She stared at him, surprised, then looked back at the fire. A small smile touched her lips, quick and shy. In the morning, Evan taught her how to repair simple machines. They sat together by the lake under the rising sun, tools scattered on a sheet of metal. He showed her how to open the drone shell, connect wires, and reset the circuits. She copied him carefully, her glowing fingers precise and quick. When her drone came to life and hovered above her palm, she laughed. It was soft and short but real. The sound startled Evan. He had never heard her laugh before. It made the quiet place feel brighter. She caught his smile and looked away, still laughing under her breath. Days turned to weeks. They planted glowing seeds Lyra had carried in a small pouch. They grew fast in the warm soil, sprouting blue leaves that shimmered at night. Lyra said they were called soul flowers, and her people believed they carried the memories of the lost. She sang to them in her language while she worked. The sound floated through the camp like silver wind. Evan repaired old panels into solar collectors and built water filters from scrap. Lyra carried stones from the hills to line the garden beds. She moved with quiet strength, her fear melting with each step. She no longer curled away when he came close. Sometimes she walked beside him, close enough that her shoulder brushed his arm. One evening they sat on the hill above the lake. The twin suns were sinking beyond the clouds, painting the sky in soft gold. The soul flowers glowed around them like tiny lanterns. Lyra leaned back on her hands, hair stirring in the wind, eyes glowing faint in the fading light. "This place is different," she said. Evan nodded. "It is safe." Her gaze stayed on the sky. "Safe feels strange." "You will get used to it," he said. She was silent for a while, then spoke softly. "I thought I was broken." Evan turned to her. "You are not broken." She looked at him, and for the first time her eyes were not guarded. They were open, clear, full of quiet fire. "I want to stay," she said. "Then stay," he replied. The wind moved across the hills, carrying the glow of the soul flowers like stars rising from the earth. Lyra smiled without hiding it this time. Evan smiled back. They sat together as the last light faded and the sky filled with stars. For the first time, neither of them felt like they were drifting alone. They had found something steady, something warm. They had found home. The moon was quiet under the silver glow of the twin suns. Weeks had passed since they first landed, and the camp had grown from scattered scrap into a small living place. Solar panels hummed on the hilltop. Drones drifted in slow circles above the garden. Soulflowers shone softly around the dome shelter, their light dancing in the night air like tiny stars. Evan stood near the lake repairing a sensor mast. The wind carried the smell of warm earth and glowing leaves. It felt nothing like the rusted silence of the junkyard. It felt alive, Behind him, Lyra walked barefoot through the garden. Her hair caught the sunlight like strands of silver fire, and her glowing eyes traced the sky. She stopped near the edge of the hill and stood still, looking up. Evan watched her from a distance. Something in her stillness made him pause. She had changed. The frightened, starving girl who once hid under broken metal had become something bright. Her steps were steady. Her shoulders no longer curled inward. The fear in her eyes had melted into quiet strength. She saw him watching and waved him over. Evan wiped his hands on a cloth and walked to her side. From the top of the hill, the land spread out like a painted dream. Blue rivers glimmered below. The soulflowers lit the slope like fallen stars. The sky above was endless and clean. "It does not feel like hiding anymore," Lyra said softly. "That is because it is not," Evan answered. She was silent for a while. The wind stirred the grass around their feet. Then she turned to face him. Her glowing eyes held something deeper than light. "I have something for you," she said. Evan raised a brow. "What is it?" Lyra reached up and lifted the cracked pendant from her neck. The faint glow inside it pulsed gently like a living heart. She held it out in her hands. Her voice was soft but steady. "In my people's way, this is a heartstone," she said. "We carry it from our mothers. We keep it safe until we find the one we give our life to." Evan froze. The pendant glimmered like a captured star between her palms. "Lyra," he began, but she shook her head gently. "You saved me when I was nothing but ashes," she said. "You gave me warmth when I was cold. You gave me peace when I had none. My heart belongs to you now." The words settled in the air like falling light. Evan could not speak for a long moment. He reached out slowly, hands trembling, and took the pendant from her. It was warm against his skin, warm in a way that was more than heat. He closed his fingers around it. "I will keep it safe," he said quietly. "I will keep you safe." Lyra stepped closer, close enough that he could see the faint glow of her pulse through her skin. Her eyes were bright with emotion she no longer tried to hide. She lifted her hand and placed it against his chest. His heart beat steady under her palm. "You already do," she whispered. Evan's throat tightened. He covered her hand with his own. The world seemed to hold its breath around them. The twin suns sank lower behind the hills, turning the lake gold. The soul flowers brightened as shadows deepened. For a long time they stood there without words. Nothing needed to be said. The silence was not empty anymore. It was full of something strong and alive. Lyra leaned her head against his shoulder. Evan wrapped his arm around her and held her close. She fit against him like she had always belonged there. The wind moved through the glowing garden. The stars began to wake above them one by one. Night settled soft on the hills. They walked back to the shelter hand in hand. The camp lights flickered on like small suns. The drones drifted above in lazy arcs. Inside, the air was warm and still. Lyra curled on the bench with her feet tucked under her. Evan sat beside her, the pendant resting around his neck now. She watched it with a quiet smile. "It suits you," she said. "It belongs to us," he replied. Her smile widened, slow and bright. She leaned against him and closed her eyes. Her breathing slowed, peaceful and sure. Evan watched the firelight dance on her face and felt the weight of all the empty years before her. They felt far away now, fading like old shadows. Outside, the soul flowers glowed brighter as the night grew dark. The lake caught the starlight and held it like glass. The world was silent but not lonely. Evan reached down and pulled the blanket around her shoulders. She murmured in her own language, soft like a song, and shifted closer in her sleep. He rested his head back against the wall and closed his eyes, feeling the steady beat of two hearts instead of one. They were no longer broken pieces drifting through the stars. They were home. They were whole.